So again, it's something that I wouldn't suggest rejecting out of hand, but certainly it's a whole lot better to waste $1 million than $750. I suggest in the long run we would be best served not even to waste $1 million.
Okay. Another question, is there a set percentage of cost overruns used that would be accurate?
You can't ever know that. The question, you're on the microphone, right? Okay. You really can't tell. I mean, in some cases, you'll get overruns like the Boston Big Dig, which were essentially 300% overruns. In other cases, it may only be 10 or 20 or 30%. So again, there's no way to know. It just happens. And a lot of it has to do with how honest the planning process is.
Okay, this is not for you, this is for the audience. There's lights on a Toyota, license plate 190SXD, two-door. If it's your vehicle, you might want to turn off the lights. If you can't start it, I'll help you jump start after. Okay, we have a next question here. Do the work trip stats you use include the higher rates of unemployment? There will be a drop in work trips due to the increase in unemployment. Where did you get the stats from? Why did you not reference your sources?
Why didn't I what? What was the last part of the question?
Why did you not reference your sources?
Oh, because they only told me I could talk for an hour. I could keep you here for 8. First of all, and I'm not being facetious. I mean, you know, you have to make these kinds of choices. All of the data on work trips is from the United States Census Bureau. They do the American Community Survey every year, and this data is from there. The Census Bureau has, through the census, been putting this data together since 1960. With respect to unemployment, no question that things are down as a result of unemployment. The general consensus, however, is that work trips for transit have actually increased, because this is a share of the overall total of people going to work. If you're unemployed, you're not in the list of, you're not included in the total of people who are employed. So, for example, during the period of time that you had the huge run-up in gasoline prices to late 2008, you had a pretty good increase in transit ridership. And that meant that around the nation, instead of carrying 1.5% of the travel, they were carrying 1.6% of the travel. So I would argue that chances are, even with this decline, it overstates the situation that would likely be the case when and if, one hopes, the economy returns.
Okay. In Sydney, they recently removed tolls from M4. Did traffic increase on the road? If so, where were those cars driving before?
On Parramatta Road. The Sydney people have, I was unaware that they'd pulled the tolls on the M4, but the Sydney area has done a lot on tolls. There's been an awful lot of complaint and that kind of thing. They just built a new bypass, the first one. I mean, Sydney has such a terrible road system, you can't believe it. A lot of problems. The freeway system is really not complete. But seriously, the adjacent roadway, it'd be sort of like what would happen if you told Interstate 5 all the way to downtown Portland. You'd have a lot of people on Interstate Avenue. Well, in Sydney, the M4 people are on Parramatta Road.
Okay, is there a way to get federal money without light rail?
Well, sure, you can get it for busways. No problem. Yeah, you could get it. I'll tell you another thing you should do. I mean, you know, I would think, given the progress that CTRAN has made in the last 20 years in improving work trips, I would suggest that it might make some sense for CTRAN to think about improving the local transit service as much as it can to increase ridership. And there are all sorts of things you could do to do that, and you can use federal money for some of that.
Okay, crime increased 48% when light rail went to Clackamas. Is this consistent everywhere?
Well, you know, the problem is there's no good data on that. And I'm not prepared to get into the supposed crime issue until there is really good data. I have no idea.
Okay. How do we make a compelling argument for the wasteful use of federal dollars? It seems like folks don't treat this, okay, can't read that, sorry, as real money taken from families, small business, etc.
Well, you know, Milton Friedman said that people are inclined to spend other people's money, to be less careful with other people's money than their own. I mean, this is plain true. I'm happy to spend your money and I will spend your money much faster than you spend your money. This is how it works. And so I know people in the transit industry, and by the way, this is not anything anti-transit. I'm sure you'll find this in other fields as well, probably education, you name it. Money that comes from the federal government doesn't come from the local taxpayers, therefore officials are not as careful with it. Money that comes from Olympia is not as important as money that comes from your own taxpayers. That's just plain human nature. So that is a real problem, and that's why in the long run we need to get less of the money from Washington, because you know, all that money we're spending from Washington, it didn't come from anybody but you to begin with.
Okay. What alternative to light rail would you propose to move larger numbers of people efficiently?
Well, the first question is there a market? I mean, at the moment, you're only carrying 3,300 people every day across the interstate bridge on transit. I doubt there's much of a demand for it. You know, and put it this way. If in the new bridge you were to build the busway I've talked about, which is simply a lane, open it to high occupancy vehicle lanes, high occupancy vehicles as well, carpools and that kind of thing. The buses would be able to deliver whatever capacity you need across that bridge. Give you an example. Curitiba, Brazil, which I showed you in the slide. In Curitiba, Brazil, they carry in one direction every hour 20,000 people on their busways, okay? 20,000 people in one direction doesn't occur in any place in the United States with respect to light rail. So there's nothing that transit demand in the United States, except for places, you know, like on the Lexington line in New York and so on. There are places where transit demand is higher than that, but there are no places that are that are within 500, 600 miles of here at least.
Okay, what is the procedure to change the current locally preferred alternative to change it? The process is supposed to be open process. How do we get the third bridge as locally preferred alternative?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, the point is that anything can be changed politically. Given that the locally preferred alternative has already been adopted, it will be difficult to change it. But, you know, if you, as citizens of Clark County, start making it very clear to your elected officials that you don't want something these people are doing, you're going to find all of a sudden they're going to be very amenable to your views.
Okay, and if you're going to use the church envelope, can you just tithe as well? I hope I don't get chewed out for all their envelopes being used. We did provide paper. Discuss how Minnesota was able to build a Neo bridge so quickly, knowing it is just a practical bridge. Why can't we look at these on, like the one in St. Louis?
Well, exactly. This is, again, one of the problems. I mean, you had a planning process that was created whereby they went through a bunch of alternatives, but among the alternatives that made it through the first cut, there was nothing without light rail or transit. Right away, we have a problem. Where was the alternative that didn't have transit? Be more affordable, all that kind of thing. My sense, I'll just quote our friend, the former president of Metro. I mean, he was very critical of the planning process, said that the money didn't make sense, the revenues weren't there, and all that kind of thing. There have been real problems with this process, and it's why it probably should be revisited.
Okay, what about subways?
Well, subways are nice. They require, to make any sense at all, that you need a real high demand. You don't have anything like that anywhere in the Portland area. You think about the subways in the United States, New York and Washington are probably the only places that have very high demand, Chicago to some extent. I mean, subways, you think about this, in terms of the hierarchy of transit, light rail and busways will carry up to about 20,000 people in one direction during peak hour. Heavy rail or metro or subway will carry as much as 40,000 people, and there are lines in Paris where they carry 60. The fact is that the 20,000 that can be carried by a subway, by a busway or a light rail line is more than enough to handle the demand in any corridor in the Portland area and most metropolitan areas of the United States.
Okay, what is, well, it says, what's the fundamental romance with PDX planners? Why do they think the way they do?
Good question. There is a real ideology that has taken over the planning profession in the last 30 or so years. It basically is of the view that cars are terrible, that they are a scourge, and that they have hurt our economy. In fact, all the evidence suggests completely the opposite. There's a view that our cities are spreading too much and we must constrain our cities and not allow them to spread. The result of that kind of thinking, frankly, led to the housing bubble, because virtually everywhere in the United States where you had huge increases in house prices, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Phoenix, the cities in Florida had Portland-style planning of one form or another. So regrettably, the planners, who oftentimes tend to be architects and urban planning educated people, they don't understand economics at all. It's too bad, and unfortunately, they don't take these things into consideration. They just see, they see cars and transit in terms of black and white. They see cities and suburbs in terms of black and white. If the planners that we have in Portland had been in charge in 1945 at the end of the Second World War, most of you people and your parents would never have owned homes. It's the truth.
Can you provide an example of a light rail installation that you would approve or consider beneficial?
Yeah, the one that runs between Yuen Long and Sun Mun in Hong Kong actually works pretty well. It's amazing what happens, though, when you've got a population density of 70,000 people per square mile instead of the 3,000 of Portland.
Besides construction of a line, what are the ancillary costs, security, crime, maintenance, etc.?
Well, it can be significant. The transit people like to claim that light rail operating costs are less than bus operating costs, and they may be per passenger mile. At the same time, however, in the long run, the maintenance costs are huge. There can be big security costs, though the big security costs generally have to do with metros. And the other problem, of course, is the capital costs. You will go to various places, transit websites, and you'll find they claim that light rail is cheaper than running buses. What they never tell you is that the capital costs of light rail, the cost of building it, are many times that of buses. It's sort of like me saying, my house only costs me $300 a month because the bank doesn't make me pay the mortgage. The mortgage is important. But in transit accounting, the mortgage doesn't even exist. Neither does the debt, by the way. The National Transit Database, which provides information on all the transit agencies in the United States, has nothing on debt. So there tends to be a huge underestimation of the costs of transit every year.
How many bridges are needed for our Oregon-Washington population?
Boy, hard to say.
It's enough
Enough to keep the congestion down. But beyond that, that's really a question I can't answer.
If bridges are 6 lanes wide and light rail pedestrian bike lanes are below, do we really need 6 lanes of light rail or 6 lanes of bikes?
Not sure I understand. I guess all I would say is that you will need the same width of bridge with or without pedestrians, bicycles, and light rail. Light rail does not do anything for traffic congestion. And I challenge anybody to show me a case where it does. Go back to the Banfield Freeway and MAX, which opened in 1986. If you look at the traffic counts on I-84, you find that for 30 days, they went down a little bit, but they were right back up by 30 days. Well, not sure it was worth, $250 million for 30 days of a little bit of reduction.
Have you heard of SkyTram International?
No.
Neither have I. Please name the agencies in Portland that want cars use reduced. What role does 1,000 Friends of Oregon play?
Well, 1,000 Friends of Oregon is a group of citizens that, like you, are very concerned. They probably tend to have views that are different than yours for the most part. They worked very hard to stop a freeway on the west side through Washington County, I think in the late 70s or whatever it was. They've been very supportive of light rail, very supportive of the Portland sort of philosophy of planning. In terms of agencies, clearly the city of Portland has done everything it can to discourage automobile use, things like reducing lanes on Martin Luther King Avenue and Grand Avenue. The TriMet, of course, has the same view, Metro as well. And there may be other agencies as well. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the cities in Metro are that as well. But your problem is the overall planning philosophy is an anti-automobile, kind of thing. And I'm not suggesting that we all ought to be going out and driving our cars all over the place. None of us drive our cars wastefully. The problem is when we stop people from driving, we stop economic action, and we increase poverty because people can't get to the jobs that might be further away, and that's the big problem.